the EFDD group, Diane James.
The fundamental EU principle of freedom of movement, people, services or goods may well have been well-intentioned, but it can only remain so if it is reactive and updated, ideally integrating and responding to both external and internal threats and pressures. Its fundamental weaknesses lie in the turgid, lengthy and often outdated processes required to address what are now fast-moving events, not merely on a European continent, but also on a global scale. But more fundamentally, on the sacrosanct protection that it enjoys in the face of fundamental threats to civic society and citizens. Trying to connect 28 member states, varied cultures and processes at a time of crisis, the EU is unable to anticipate events or be able to react at adequate speed to these events. Now, this is not an approach capable of countering or indeed beating terrorism. When there is a threat, it is important to think like the adversary, not bury oneself in mindless dialogue and consultation with the objective of protecting a sacred cow. Now, the United Kingdom endured some 30 years of conflict and terrorist activities before a resolution in Northern Ireland was found. The UK has much to offer the European and international community on how to counter terrorism, not least money laundering, a key element in terrorist funding and financing. But in contrast, the EU seems purely focused on unified border control and a central intelligence agency. But these so far have been total failures, critical weaknesses only serving to facilitate the recent terrorist atrocities. Now again, the United Kingdom has led the way in combating international counter-terrorist efforts via the Five Eyes, Signet, and as a founding member of the Global Counterterrorism Forum. And the UK will maintain those responsibilities, EU member or not. In contrast, the EU reaction to the migrant crisis has been unhelpful in extreme, and its reactions unhelpful and just like those of a rabbit in the headlights. The EU has its border control, Frontex, which consumes several hundred millions of euros, but is non-operational and little more than a data collection and analysis agency. Produces reports and stats, fine. Supposed to coordinate the activities of member states in border control, according to its charter. But in fact, it has no operational capability, and it has to rely on NATO, individual member states, and other operational forces to do anything useful. Indeed, we've got a basic conflict of interest here for Frontex, in that the EU mantra is open borders with no control. The EU probably never imagined that its open border mantra would encourage the movement of criminals, terrorists and weapons. The result has been that a number of countries have had to take unilateral action to defend their borders and actually, as a result, breaking their treaty obligations. But just look at Intercen, set up as a fledgling European intelligence agency. Yet another failure, doing little more than gathering data. The collection of data such as fingerprints, mentioned already by others, at the borders within Europe has been a disastrous example. Only 17% of migrants at key points of entry have been fingerprinted. And to make matters worse, even if their fingerprints have been taken, no one within member states has been allowed to share that data. There could be no greater gift to terrorism than being invisible and untraceable, yet this is what the European Union approach facilitates. We've talked about PNR. Well, that's stuck in turgid debates, as we well know. But there are issues about privacy and human rights, and I do wonder, having been criticised for the comment of Frontier Europe, are we not actually building that? For too many in this Parliament, the response is, and rectification of these failures, we need more Europe. And we heard that this afternoon. Well, would anyone pour more money into an approach and into structures that are broken, They're ill-conceived and they're ineffective, but they can be addressed, just not by doing more of the same. That is the definition of an idiot. It could well be argued that the EU should stick to matters that it can usefully address and do well, but stay out of matters where it does not have the experience or capability. General Michael Hayden, ex-head of NSA in the US, said, "Security is a national issue." Now it's time the EU and the Parliament open to its eyes to what's going on.
Frau James, kommen Sie bitte zum Ende, ja.
Please conclude.
And just bear in mind that the future is and should be recognised. Bilateral agreements based on good data exchange, trusted data exchange and experience is the way forward, not trying to coerce 28 member states to do one thing.
Vielen Dank, Frau James.